and the scriptures started to become alive, and Christ became real for me. He was real. And then the idea of becoming a priest just started to enter my head. I can't explain it other than I kept having options, and it was just a little more stronger leaning towards religious life.
On In Good Faith, we believe that all faith traditions have something to teach us about how God is working in the world and in our lives. So join us as we listen and learn. Today on In Good Faith, we have the wrap-up to our mini-series on contemplation and a contemplative life. If you want to hear the rest of the series, you can listen to Rich and Joan Liversidge, Quakers in Maryland, discussing their experience of silence and worship. You can also hear interviews with Joan Berta and Susan Bentley, who I met during a retreat at the Holy Cross Abbey in Berryville, Virginia. They speak to what keeps bringing them both, neither of them Catholic, back to the silence of Holy Cross. Today, we're exploring the experience of Holy Cross and its monks more fully. We'll be hearing the sounds of the Abbey and also speaking with 4 men who live cloistered there, Brother Paul, Brother John, Brother Efrain, and Father James, who'll share their very different reasons for what brought them here to the Abbey and why they choose to stay. The monks at the Abbey made a big exception for me by granting these interviews. Normally, guests at the Abbey rarely interact with the brothers except when attending and hearing them chanting in chapel. And everyone who attends the retreats commits themselves to silence wherever they are on the Abbey grounds, whether in chapel, eating together at meals, or even on walks. For myself, over the last decade, I've wondered about what people gain from contemplation and silence. It doesn't seem to me just sitting in a cell. Here the monks both work and pray. Ora et labora. So what is their life like here? Why do they chant and sing? Why are their days ordered so strictly? And why do they decide to commit themselves to what they call a religious life? And have they ever regretted their decision? And of course, I wanted to ask them why they believe in God and what their experience is with the divine. The Trappist monks at the Holy Cross Abbey outside of Berryville, Virginia, chant and sing throughout the day, and for those who go on retreats to the Abbey to seek peace and tranquility from the busyness of daily life, their voices provide an inspiring backdrop. Retreatants, yes, that's a real word, and no, you don't have to be Catholic, can go to Holy Cross and join the monks in prayer and silence. I'm out taking a walk on Cool Springs Lane. That's the road that goes through Holy Cross Abbey. Holy Cross is in the Shenandoah Valley right by the river with the Blue Ridge Mountains around it. And what you can't hear are 2 deer off to my left. So, a very peaceful place. This abbey has been here as a monastery since the 1950s, when the brothers came from an abbey that burned down in Rhode Island. It's a place where they carry out their quiet contemplation, where they make honey and other products to support themselves, where they have a natural cemetery. Thomas Merton, the famous and much read Catholic monk, said that it's in that silence that we hear our true selves, which is not necessarily who we think we are when we are thinking, but is that essential part of us that came with us from God. It is the place where God speaks to us if we can find it amidst all the noise. The Holy Cross Abbey has been a place of peace and tranquility, both for the monks and the retreatants. Each day is pierced by the clear tolling of bells that call those at the Abbey to prayer, physical labor, spiritual study, and contemplation or retirement. This is the divine office, sometimes known as the Liturgy of Hours. It's an ancient tradition that marks certain hours of the day for specific prayers and psalms. Maybe you've heard of Vespers, the evening prayer, or Lauds, or Matins. The monks arise before dawn and abstain from work or sound in those early hours in anticipation of the Lord's return. You may have heard of Gregorian chant. Well, the Trappist monks are famous for their recordings of Gregorian chant, which builds on ancient poetry of the Psalms with the plain song of the Western Church.
From the fears and terrors of the night, defend us, Lord, by thy great might.
To help me understand the importance of music in the life of the Abbey, Father James took time out of his schedule to speak with me. Father James has blonde hair fading to gray. He leads the chanting, often equipped with a pitch pipe tucked up the sleeve of his robe. He comes from an Italian-American family and has been at the Abbey for 47 years. A huge part of the tradition is the musical element.
Oh, sure.
That
sure.
the Psalms are not just read like the other scripture readings,
right.
but they are chanted. What does that add to your life that you get to sing and in unison with your brothers as well?
Yeah. You've hit upon it in talking about you're singing in unison with your brothers. It is something that, again, it's finding that common ground and that cooperation, and we're making something together. It's kind of counterintuitive to say, stop work, go to the office. Well, you just don't rush through the Psalms. You make art. No, that's a crazy thing to do. Why do you do that? Because this is so important. And precisely that element that's not purely rational. It's not irrational, but it's non-rational. God doesn't need it, but this reminds us how beautiful that relationship is. That we have to enshrine it in art. We have to enshrine it in music. And of course, as you said, music connects with the soul and the heart. It lifts you up. So it says, not only is this important, the way we do it is something that re-energizes us. And it is unimportant to us whether people are in the back of church or not. But if visitors are there, it must communicate something to them too. And it says who we are, not only us in choir, but who we are as human beings, we and the guests and so on and so forth. So the fact that we sing the Psalms, very important. And it's not a performance. We're not doing it for the edification of others, but it's expressing that communion that we're trying to aim at in what we're living.
As you can imagine, I was glad to witness the brothers chanting. Most of us think of Gregorian chant in Latin, but these brothers sing in English. It's sung in unison, a cappella, and occasionally there's call and response. Maybe you can even hear Father James start the chant with his pitch pipe.
Rejoice, you heavens, in the heights, upon the earth and on the seas, for Christ our risen.
Their melodic chanting helps the monks center themselves on Jesus. They sing at every office except the very earliest, called vigils, which is at 3:30 in the morning. Retreatants are invited to attend in order to begin their day with centeredness. It's one thing to set your alarm for 3 a.m., and it's something else entirely to actually get out of bed then.
Good morning. It is just after 3 a.m., and I'm outside walking quickly along the trail from the retreat house to get to the monks' chapel over in the part of the monastery where they live. So this is Vigil, which is the very first of this set of prayers and chants that happen throughout the day. Chants to start the day before the world is awake and to pray for the world. Even the animals are quiet at this time of day. In fact, I've heard almost nothing except my footsteps until just now. Coming up near the chapel, I hear the very first crickets.
These monks join and stay with the cloistered community because of the peace that it offers. They experience what they refer to as the rhythm of the day, as they go through their daily tasks, Mass, meditation, prayer, songs of praise, and to better connect with the divine, silence also persists throughout the day. The community works together to create an atmosphere that's palpably peaceful, both for the Trappist monks who reside at Holy Cross, as well as for the retreatants who visit. Ultimately, the monks seek to find God in this peaceful community. I spoke with Brother Efrain, who's charged with caring for the retreatants of Holy Cross Abbey. He's originally from New York City and has been at Holy Cross for 19 years. Brother Efron was exactly who I imagined a monk to be. Solidly built, good-natured, and, at the moment, walking with a cane as he recovers from surgery. I ask him what appeals to him about this community.
I think what really attracted me to monastic life was the rhythm of the day. Mm-hmm. You know, the getting up really early in the morning. We get up at 3 and we start prayers at 3:30. I liked that, praying at that hour, to pray for the world and for people who are sinning at that hour. Mm. And we also pray for our government. We're very close to Washington. That was one of the reasons why the monks came here, was because Washington is so close. That would be part of our prayer life here. So that attracted me, that rhythm, the silence, the chanting, and it all adds to that whole monastic rhythm that we have all day long. And, you know, I'm not saying it's all euphoric and you're always on cloud nine. You know, you have your moments, we're human beings, but we always return back to that, to that rhythm, to that prayer, which is constant. And that's one of the reasons why we observe the silence that we do, because it's only in silence that God really talks to you. So we're constantly talking to him in that silence.
I'm wondering if you could comment a little bit more about that silence. So there's time spent in community prayer, gathered with the Psalms and the Scripture. I'm assuming there's also individual prayer time.
Oh, sure.
Talk to me about the silent times, about listening for God and how you perceive contact or direction with the divine.
It's a hard question to answer because it's not something like, oh yeah, God is talking to me right now. It's nothing like that. You just go about your day, and if there's something pressing on you in your mind, you just turn it over to God. I put this in your hands, Lord. Walk with me with this. Or if I'm having problems with someone or something, walk with me because I need you at this moment. It's not that he's going to say, okay, Efron, don't worry, I'll be right with you. Hold on, I've got a couple of other people to look at. It's nothing like that, but you have a sense of peace. It's an inner peace that you experience, that you never lose. I can be in the midst of a war, but I can always have that sense of peace. When I was a Capuchin, although there were good years, there were also some years of turmoil for me because of this whole monastic thing, which was in the back burner of my head. And I kept thinking, Lord, I really feel attracted to that. So it was almost like a tug of war. But yet I never lost that sense of peace, that inner peace. And that's what I carried with me. I've carried with me all these years. And I know that that's the Holy Spirit working in my life, because he's the one who calls, and I've answered. And because I've given myself to him, I think his gift in return is that sense of peace.
I had a small taste of this cloistered life during my retreat of 5 days at the monastery, and my time was much more unstructured than the monks' offices. My work at the retreat was to think about my own life, my own spirituality, envisioning where I'd like to be, and taking those few days apart from my normal life as a gift that I could use for my spiritual betterment or as a form of rest and restoration. And frankly, some of the retreatants were grateful for the opportunity to finally just take a nap. Being at a retreat at a monastery did direct my thoughts to the spiritual aspects of my life, even as simple as spending a couple of hours making a gratitude list, because that's what I felt directed to do that morning. There's something powerful about existing as you are now. Even laying aside thinking about future plans or ruminating on the past, being in the now, who you are, where you are. You're listening to In Good Faith. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Hi, this is Stephen Cap Perry, and I'd love to recommend one of our BYU Radio family of podcasts for you. It's called The Appleseed. It's filled with stories for you and your family. Every episode features really excellent, nationally known storytellers sharing all kinds of folk tales, fairy tales, personal and family stories. It's great to put on and listen to for road trips or bedtime for kids, or anytime you want something to get the whole family not only listening, but then those stories generate conversations. And it's so easy to say, hey, do you have a story about this? Or, oh, that reminds me of when Grandma said, or whatever it might be. Check out the Appleseed podcast. You'll have fun, and you might learn some new stories from your own family members.
Was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be.
Welcome back. This is In Good Faith. So is that everything a day in the life of a monk at Holy Cross entails? Singing, silence, and studying Scripture? Actually, these monks also have to deal with everyday human issues as well, and work together to help their community function as part of the contemplative life. You remember Father James, who leads the chanting? He spoke to me about how the contemplative life and dealing with others in the community while striving to maintain a peaceful atmosphere keeps you focused on your relationship with God.
You know, the point was that you living a contemplative life. And that is what attracted me. Also the fact of the liturgy is an intimate part of our life, probably the most important part of our life. And then very down to earth, you have the whole setting for that contemplative life in just the manual work. And being grounded in that, you really have to have your feet on the ground, and you're dealing with deadlines, and you're dealing with the limits of the materials you're working with, and so much that's really out of your control. It keeps you from floating off like a balloon without a string on it. So I think what that it kind of drove home was that the contemplative life is a way of life. It's not just a series of practices or disciplines. And as you could describe any form of prayer, it's your relationship with God. That's not a definition of prayer, but it is a very good description. And that relationship can take place anywhere and in any forum, in any activity. And of course, being an enclosed community, living with other people and navigating that is a very important part of that relationship with God. And the ups and downs are not irrelevant. They're an important part of it. Living through the hard times together binds you together as much as the high points do. So I think it was very attractive to me as time went by, which I didn't see at first when I first approached the monastery, was that there was a unity of all these different elements, and that they work together. And it being a person of prayer was not just something detached from the everyday, but was experienced through the mundane details. So there was a real antidote to any dualism, you know, matter versus spirit or whatever. That became much more important and more attractive as the decades went by.
As Father James discussed, the monks have to physically labor to keep the community functioning, like they're beekeeping or plumbing or tending to the gardens to raise their food. Yet they're also working with their hands to attain solidarity with those working people around the world who have to eat their bread by the sweat of their brow. And it's remarkable to me that they work in their robes. Imagine a middle-aged man in a long-sleeved white tunic that falls to his ankles. Over this is a narrow black overlay called a scapular that hangs down the front and the back, including a hood. all of this bound around the waist by a belt or rope. I discussed what physical labor the monks do and why it's so important with Brother Paul. Brother Paul is wiry and energetic with a baseball cap over his bald head. I wonder if you could talk to me about the concept of ora et labora, the prayer and the work. So
Sure.
There's the rhythm of the offices that are or observed throughout the day, but there is actual labor involved. Can you talk to me about that?
I'm a blue collar worker. I mean, I can only sit down for so long. I got a desk or a computer. So that attracted me to the monastic life, especially the Trappists. They're more into work than maybe some other Benedictine houses. I mean, they do work, but it might be teaching or whatever. But
in fact, when we were setting up this time, I saw the cogs turning in your brain when you said, well, see, this day I'll be doing that. I'll be finished with the honey or whatever the project was.
Or cutting grass.
Tell me the types of things you do.
Yeah, so I've been blessed, at my monastery in New York. I've done so many variety of jobs which I never would have done if I didn't join. Like we in a bakery with monk's bread is where they make the bread. So we were working in the bakery, all the different machineries. I was a bakery manager for a while. I drove some heavy equipment. I got a tractor trailer license to be able to haul the bread if we had to, if our driver called in sick. So I've done welding, mechanics, photography, online store.
Wow.
And here I've only been here 6 months, but I've cooking. I learned to cook a little bit at the monastery, so I'm a cook. I think I'm a better baker than I am a cook. So I've been baking some artisan breads. And, here we do fruit cakes, creamed honey, and then everything that needs to be done in a community of people. Cooking, cleaning, maintenance. So I like it because I like the chant, the choir for sure, the community prayer. But when you're at work, you could be praying too. Is serving God in the church, but also serving God, in the kitchen or creaming, making honey or whatever. I like that activity, but also the quiet time.
I really like Brother Paul's idea about bringing godly intention to our everyday tasks. Can our work mean more to us if we bring prayer and dedication to God with us in what might seem like the mundane daily life? Whether that's doing the dishes multiple times a day or answering hours of emails or putting in that French drain across your lawn on a July afternoon. That's an idea I can bring back with me and could influence what I do and how I do it every day. So we've heard why the monks stay and what their daily life looks like, but why do monks join a monastery? Or why become a monk in the first place? Trappist monks find very different paths to this lifestyle of prayer, song, and contemplation. Some have always known this is what they wanted their life to look like, while others found themselves on a winding, twisting path to the Holy Cross Abbey. I sat down with one monk who joined the order late in life, taking a very unconventional road to get there. Here's part of my conversation with Brother John. He's tall and broad, and it was no surprise to find out what his former profession had been before he came to Holy Cross in 2017.
I did a lot of things throughout my life, involved in politics, involved in the fire service. I retired from the fire service, and I tell some of my old comrades that I'm still in the fire service. It's just a different kind of fire. And it's still saving people. But about 12 or so years ago, I was working for the state of Connecticut in the fire marshal's office, and my workaholism was taken over by my alcoholism, which led me to a rehab. And the first night of the rehab, I knew my life was going to change and kind of was at the bottom, and asked the Lord, what do you want me to do? And he said to give back to the church. It wasn't a voice, it was just a feeling or whatever. And so that led me to talking to a Catholic nun and said to her that I needed to learn how to pray like an adult. I knew all my, grammar school prayers and all that stuff, but they were just words. So she gave me several books. Some guy by the name of Thomas Merton, Thomas Keating, Klein, Pennington, all these people, I had no idea who they were. Trappist monks, I didn't know any of that. I mean, I knew what a monk was, but anyway, probably about 9 or 10 months later, I found myself starting my discernment and in Kentucky, and started for the next 2 years made several trips down there. So in 2013, I found myself down here. And over the course of the next few years, in February of 2017, I entered. People ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, where did you feel you were for wanting to become a monk? And my response was 35. There was no my feeling of becoming a monk. I think learning not to so much rely on what's logical or what's emotional, but, well, I guess you can call it the gut feeling, but that inner something is driving you and wanting you to be here. And because from a logical point of view, I had adult children by that time and everything, and they were on their own, but I still had a family back home, and I'm an older person. What am I doing with this? But the Lord wants me here. And all along this path, that's what I was saying. I think it's become a monk because he's got me going down this road. But the only thing I could be certain of is he wanted me down this road.
These monks sacrificed the worldly, including romantic relationships, to give everything to God. Some of them, like Brother John, joined the monastery later in life. Others have been monks for most of their lives, having joined early in their adulthood. So even though they may have taken different paths, they each felt there was a path. Like Brother John just said, he, meaning God, wanted me down this road. And if you feel that and have some confidence in that, your other concerns sort of fade into the background. Brother Efrain talks to me about how and when he joined the order, leaving behind a career and a potential marriage. You might remember him as the friendly-faced guest master at the Abbey, the one who welcomes the retreatants when they arrive.
Back in the 60s, when I was growing up in New York City, the parish was the center of your life. We were always involved in some kind of an outing with the church or working in the church. My real first job was sacristan of our parish, where I actually received a salary. I was 16 years old and I had to get working papers, I remember. And that was my first job in the parish. My first girlfriend came from the parish because we were all together. So from there, being around priests and sisters and the brothers, you can't help but think, I like this, this feels comfortable. Well, that lasted just so long. When you grow up, you start to grow up, things start to change a bit, and the girls look more appetizing than, a vocation. So I went through that phase as well, I didn't really go to church for a bit, but never totally divorced myself from my faith or church. I just kind of mellowed out a little bit and then eventually did return. And when I did return, I didn't think in terms of religious life right away. A friend of mine, a priest, as a matter of fact, from the parish, I was looking for a weekend job. He says, why don't you go over to Bobby McDonald's place, which was the funeral home? I said, the funeral home? He said, yeah, they're looking for someone for weekends. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a weekend job because I was in school. So I went over and they hired me. Little by little, I started to become interested in the funeral business. And I liked it. I really did like it a lot. And so I switched colleges and I went to the mortuary college instead and graduated and got my license and became a licensed funeral director in New York. So I did that for a number of years before actually entering religious life. And I broke up with my girlfriend. And that was a biggie for me. And I remember going downtown to a Catholic church that I knew, which was run by the Capuchin Franciscan friars. The friars were always very gentle people in their parishes. I always liked them. Good preachers, good confessors. And so I went to St. John's on 32nd Street, and I just asked to speak to someone because I needed to talk, get this out of my system. And down comes this little friar by the name of Father Barnabas, who's now in heaven, God rest his soul. And he became my spiritual director. And from that point on, things just started to unravel and roll. And before I knew it, I was entering the Capuchin order. So I was a Capuchin friar for 22 years. I was a missionary, and so I was selected to go. And it was a whole team of friars from different provinces throughout the United States that were going to be working together to establish this new province in the northern part of Mexico. We were establishing our Capuchin presence in the northern part of the country. And I was one of them because I do speak Spanish. And while there is when the whole Trappist vocation really started growing and becoming really strong. So when I finished, I was there for 4 years. I went to we have a Trappist monastery in Mexico, and I decided to go there and make a retreat. And was there that the guest master, the same job I have now, he heard my story and he said, well, I think the Lord is calling you to this way of life. But don't do it here in Mexico. Do it in your own country so you can be close to your family. I said, oh, absolutely. So he said, do you know of a monastery in the States? So when it was time to make a decision, I thought of Holy Cross Abbey. And so I came here, and I've been here now 19 years.
Family and romantic relationships aren't the only thing that these monks have had to sacrifice. Other jobs, schooling, even athletic aspirations had to be set aside for God. I sat down with Brother Paul to talk about his upbringing as well as his own personal struggles, choosing a monastic life over that of marriage and family. He also set aside a potential career as a soccer player and coach.
I came from an American-Italian family, mother, father, 2 sisters, and we brought up in basically public schooling. If they had asked me to go to Catholic school, I would have revolted, because at the time, religion was always present in my family. My mother, for sure, we'd go to church on Sunday, but that was it. And my family had a mobile gas station. I worked the gas station, but also played a lot of sports, and just kind of, typical high school student. And then I went to college to play soccer.
What did you study in college?
Economics, but also athletic coaching. I was coaching at the time and like a referee, so I was always into sports, big time.
At what point did you first consider a vocation?
I wasn't sure what I wanted to do other than play soccer. There was a campus minister who was actually still there. Imagine that, almost 40 years. And who had a campus ministry kind of thing and a retreat program. I just saw him, affecting the student body just by his presence, happy being a priest. And it's kind of like, wow, kind of new to me. And even though I had gone on a retreat earlier, before I went to that college, which got the spiritual part of life kind of opening up for me. But the whole God question was still kind of vague, even though I believed. I had a belief, but it wasn't like real. It was more cerebral and passed on, but never really my own. So seeing him do his ministry, he took us on retreats. I was part of this team that would plan the retreat. And he took me up to a monastery up in Weston, Vermont, Weston Priory. And that kind of like opened my eyes to monastic life. I haven't ever exposed to it before. And I was dating a girl at the time, Suzanne, and I was dropping her off up in that area to teach school, and I had a year of college left. And on the way down, we passed Spencer, Massachusetts, where there's a monastery of ours. And we stopped in and talked to one of the monks there, and which kind of just opened my eyes to, wow,
Just asking what his life was like?
Yeah, it was kind of unplanned. We saw a sign, like, oh, let's go. And it was an older monk, Father Owen. And he spent about a half hours with us, and I just remember leaving there saying, man, imagine living like a year here, how it could change your life. I was dating Suzanne, I had no intention. And then just things started to evolve with Father Larry at college. I think he gave me a brochure on religious life, different orders. I just started to flip through it, and wow. And I really can't tell you exactly what happened, but all I know is on the retreats, he was reading scripture, at which I never really read the Bible before. We never even had a Bible in our house. And the scriptures started to become alive. And I mean, it's going to sound kind of crazy, but Christ became kind of real for me. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I just sensed he was real. And then the idea of becoming a brother, a priest, just started to enter my head and my heart. But I was still dating, I was still at college. Really didn't take it seriously because I knew you had to give up, being married,
Yeah.
and the whole thing. And I'm like, well, I'm not giving that up. But gradually he works on you. And that became a little bit more attractive. I can't explain it. Other than I kept having options, continue to date and maybe get married or follow religious life. And it was just a little more stronger leaning towards religious life.
So not so much, it sounds like one overpowering event, but just a pull.
Yeah, just an attraction. It's tough to put in words because people think, I don't know what people think, but most people think that we understand the monastic life. Most of the monks probably would say, I don't really understand how I'm here. How has the Lord called me and kept me here? Because it's been a struggle. I've been happy in a lot of ways, but it's also been a struggle. And again, by God's grace, I'm still working at it.
They haven't let you start a soccer team for the Abbey yet.
No, I don't think I'd want it right now. But in the early, that was one of my pulls, when I first joined. Being out in the fall where the season starts and playing and coaching. But that's a non-issue for many years. But at the beginning, it was an issue.
You're listening to In Good Faith. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Hi, I'm Stephen Cap Perry, host of In Good Faith. Nothing captivates me more than people setting out on an adventure, especially if it's a place I wish I could go to or a subject I wish I knew more about, but I don't live in the right place or I don't have the equipment or the expertise. I'm telling you about a podcast from our BYU Radio family of podcasts, an award-winning podcast called Constant Wonder. With host Marcus Smith, you'll be expanding your horizons on all kinds of discovery. It could be science, it could be art, history, and more. Do you need that feeling of awe and wonder in your life more? I do, and I love it when I see how to experience that by hearing the stories of people who are doing and exploring all of those things that are so interesting to me. Check out the podcast, Constant Wonder.
It is like precious oil upon the head.
Welcome back. This is In Good Faith. These men have put away the world for their own spiritual benefit, but they've also invited the world to the Abbey as retreatants. As I was preparing to go on this retreat and was telling the In Good Faith team that there would be a lot of silence and it was all about contemplation, there were a few comments like, good luck with that, I would never do it. But it's the silence that draws people to the monastery. In my conversation with Father James, we talked about what he sees with the retreatants year after year. I don't know if there's a way to sum up a massive experience when people come for very different reasons, but what is it that a retreat like this can offer to someone who's seeking something in that silence?
I think the great thing is the silence itself. Also, if I have the opportunity to, I tell people when they begin the retreat, don't have any expectations. Don't have any projects. Don't have any goals of what's going to come out of this. It's not going to solve all your problems. It's not going to tell you what direction you just be in the moment. That's so important. The present is all we have. The past is over. The future's not here yet. And that's not part of our culture.
No.
We're so often either goal-oriented or we're enshackled by our past. And it's like, just be now. Just be now. And it can be very difficult to quiet things down, or just trying to do that can take the lid off all the inside noise. But it's important just to patiently sit with that and to see what's there. And sometimes I think it can be very healing for people to take a walk in this natural setting.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. We're surrounded by wildlife, and you're in close touch with the seasons, and everything's growing, or it's reached the end of its growth, and it's slowing down or whatever. Sometimes that can really quiet down what's inside. And again, it's a question of literally putting your feet on the ground, but self-consciously. It's not just happening accidentally. And being here, you don't have all those daily things that are pulling on your attention or that are distracting you or that are, flagging you down and distracting you from yourself. So to be free of that, your housing is taken care of, your meals are taken care of, you have a safe place to sleep. All of a sudden, there's a lot of things you don't have to worry about. And that can be a way of discovering a part of yourself that you didn't know that was there. Or people who come here again and again, they know they're going to find that. And they just need to get away from the rather inhuman way we have of living now. Is so much, moving so fast, trying to encompass so many things, going after so many goals, wearing so many masks. No, here you don't have to do any of that.
We can learn from our response to the idea of silence. No video games, no TV shows, or even, dare I say it, podcasts to distract us. What is it that makes us think we might be uncomfortable being by ourselves, in silence, in our own minds? And I realized I was looking forward to the silence and the contemplation, the long walks, and listening to the daily offices of the priests chanting and singing. But I'm not sure I would have felt the same way in my 30s. The first thing I realized in the silence was how much more comfortable I am with who I am and who I am to God than I was back then.
Lord, hear my voice.
At the Abbey, the monks have provided a space so other people can grow spiritually, and there's an opportunity to meet with a priest to ask questions and seek confession, although at this Abbey it's self-directed and not required. But the monks themselves also experience a spiritual transformation. In their time at the Holy Cross Monastery, they often grow closer to God and to each other. In my conversations with Father James and Brothers Paul, Efrain, and John, I asked them about their own personal relationships with God and why they believed. Father James spoke about how doubts have actually helped his faith in God.
Whether it is doubts about faith, doubts about God, doubts about my vocation, doubts about myself, that's when you find out what faith really is. That struck me. If there's any value to studying Aquinas, it's to take the doubts seriously, and that they're gifts in the long run. And that's what is going to get you beyond the idol you've made. You can make an idol of God, and it's still an idol. It has to be smashed and replaced by the reality. And whether we see our faith that way or whether we see our religious practice or our vocation, none of those things can remain as idols. And the way you go through them is having doubts about them. And again, you're not on your own. Having a good spiritual director is a very important part of this life, to walk you through that, not to give you answers, but to walk you through that. You probably don't emerge at the other end of that tunnel with answers, but you have convictions, and you're walking on solid ground. It's so experiential.
Brother Paul, the former soccer player and coach, spoke to me about how faith can be a gift that we don't truly understand.
They say, to believe, to have faith is a grace. It's a gift. That's a mystery too, right? Why do some people believe and some people don't believe? He gave it to me, but he didn't give it to, my friend, so that's a mystery. So I really can't explain it other than I do believe, I do have the faith, and I have my doubts. Everyone who believes, it's almost natural to have doubts. But why I believe, I can't explain that. Then through the scriptures, Christ became alive to me, real to me. But I don't think anyone can really explain it. I use the example, I don't know if it's kind of corny, but it's like falling in love with someone. Mm-hmm. Can you really explain it?
No.
So if I ask you, can you explain how you fell in love with your wife? And could you really explain it?
There's a point at which I would just sort of have to just say, I just did.
Right. So same with the monastery and God. I mean, you don't have to be in a monastery to believe in God, of course not, but to believe in God, to believe in Christ, the Catholic faith, and then having him kind of call the shots and leading you toward the monastery. It's not pushed. He doesn't push you, kind of give you a little nudge, a little hint. But even if I left, I'd still believe. I mean, I still treasure my Catholic faith. So if I got booted out or left, I still be Catholic. I'm living my Catholic faith, hopefully. I just feel everything is here for me.
Yeah. For those of us like me who are Christian and we hope to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, have there been moments that it felt like a gift to you to be a little bit separate from the world, almost like Jesus and his disciples were?
I don't know. It's funny, I've been in the monastery for so long, but I've never really felt isolated. Of course, we're separated, and we're living in a cloister, but I never felt this like detachment, and because I really feel my being here, and even the monks in general. But for me, part of my journey is I'm here for the world, and to witness to Christ, to witness to God, witness to the Catholic faith. So I've said it more than once to other people over the years that if I ever woke up one day and thought I was here like just for myself, that's the day I leave, because I really felt your vocation is for others, for the church, and for me too. But if it's just me, like saving my soul, I'm out of here, because for me, I want it to be used to help other people grow closer to God and maybe question God, question the question, is there a God? And I think being in a monastery gets people thinking that of any faith, let alone just Catholics, maybe yourself, a group of men who really don't know each other, choose to live 24/7 basically under the same roof in peace. That's kind of a witness. I've never really felt separated from the world, and actually I feel very much connected.
Brother Efron described to me the experience that brought him closer to God, one that involved his health.
I have cardiac problems, and I had angina, had to go to the hospital, and while I was there, stretched out, they had put 2 stents in me. And I remember feeling this sense of, it wasn't that I didn't care, it was this really sense of euphoria, I guess is the word, this peace that just lifted me up. And I remember telling the superior who came to anoint me, I says, Jesus can walk in right now and say, Efron, come on, let's go home. And I would say, absolutely. And not feel scared or, no, I have to stay here a little longer because I have to make, do amends with you. Nothing like that. Because to me, at that moment, he was like pure love. And I didn't feel like I needed to repent over anything. That's the reason why I am who I am, because of him. And so I guess that would be the closest answer to your question.
What a peaceful and reassuring sense to have.
Oh, and it lasted 2 weeks. And then one day, it just disappeared, all that sense of peace and, really happiness. I really felt happy. That I almost believed that I was on my way to heaven. And then it was over. And I remember going to Father Tom saying, it's over.
Then you have to exercise faith and remember that feeling.
Well, I tried. I could talk about it here, but not here.
At this point, Brother Efron moves his hand from his heart to his head.
And this is where I experienced it.
Yeah.
It was holistic.
Yes.
But all of a sudden it became separated because, like I said, it disappeared. So all I have is a recollection of that and not the actual feeling. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Brother John, on the other hand, tied his belief back to his recovery from alcoholism.
I want to ask about two things that tie in with an AA meeting. You say, one is that you have to recognize a higher power.
Yes.
At the very beginning. Had you always had that belief in your life?
I would say down deep, yes. I was a cradle Catholic, probably my college years, after my college years, I really didn't practice my faith. I mean, I would go to church occasionally. Ironically, I would not go on Christmas or Easter because the people that don't really believe are hypocrites go on Easter, and just the logic I would use. But it was always there. And that foundation was there, whether I really understood it. And like I said, for whatever reason, I probably almost every night blessed myself before I went to sleep. Yet I wasn't practicing my religion or any religion.
Were there times in that stretch that you felt that you reached out to God or were directed, or was it more of a distant thing at that time?
I would say it was a distant thing. And now looking back on it, I was the distance. He wasn't. There's the nun that I talked about, she mentions how, there's no coincidences. She called them God winks. And looking back and seeing the different God winks that showed up, and I just didn't recognize it. And he kept me safe. I mean, just because I sure was on a reckless path.
There's also a sense, and you can tell me, you can correct me, a sense that there is a little bit or some type of surrender when you commit to an order like this. You are in some way surrendering to God.
And I would say that the AA experience was one that, of course it started in rehab, but it was a 12-step program. The realization that surrender is the way to go and is love, that actually made it easier to make the decision to come into a cloistered life, and just understanding that. And the old saying is, surrender, because obviously I've made a mess of everything up to this point. So now surrender to that love, which is very much against, as you know, the culture today. I mean, it's all about me and
self-determination.
Yes, and I'm going to make everything, and it's all you can do is pray and get you past that.
Our show is all about personal journeys, and I was glad to hear from our Cistercian brothers about why they believe and why they continue as monks. And I loved the chance to explore with them what the music and chanting means, how they combine their work and their prayer life, and I'm grateful for their stories about why they chose what they did. Listening to them gives us all a chance to ask ourselves the very same questions. And those aren't always questions we have instant answers for. And we don't have to immediately know the answers. But perhaps that's part of our spiritual path, and I was grateful for days of quiet and contemplation to be able to consider my own answers to those questions. And my task now is to find moments like that in my own daily routine, moments of silence, and be listening to hear those answers when they present themselves. Many thanks to Father James and Brothers Efrain, Paul, and John of Holy Cross Abbey in Berryville, Virginia. This episode was produced by me, Stephen Cap Perry, and Josh Orton. Our production team also includes Leah King, Katarina Martinic, Aaliyah Ebert, and James Sturdivant. Our sound designers are Mark Hansen, Daniel Phillips, Lauren Sandberg, and Ashton Parkinson. In Good Faith is committed to the idea that we all benefit from hearing people of widely varying backgrounds share their personal experience with faith and belief. In fact, we think people with such experience deserve some of our best listening. If you enjoy In Good Faith, be sure you leave a comment or review on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, and help spread the word. Find us on Twitter at In Good Faith Pod, on Instagram and Facebook at In Good Faith Podcast. In Good Faith is a production of BYU Radio. I'm Stephen Cap Perry. I hope you'll join me again soon, right here in Good Faith.